Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit. Okay, all you citizens of the world, it's time for the first guest on Live from the Heartland. We are recording this on Labor Day for the week of September 7th, and I'm honored once again to bring my alderwoman back on, the one and only Maria Hadden, the alderperson from the fighting, very blue 49th Ward. Hello to you on Labor Day, Maria.
Hello and happy Labor Day, Michael.
So far, it's really good. Now, let me ask you right off the get, how do you think the city handled the Democratic Convention, both on the inside and the outside?
I think we did a good job, and I think it's fitting, I'll say, as we're recording this on Labor Day, I want to take a moment to thank all of the union labor who made sure that the DNC went off without a hitch. Hosting such a large event, and not just a large event, but such a high profile event is really a challenge. And so from, folks at the United Center to McCormick Place, to our transit workers, right? All the food service workers and hospitality folks at all the hotels and industries, everybody just went above and beyond, and our city shone. So I'm really, pleased. I think most Chicagoans should be pleased with how, the public and private side of the city really came together, and how the people of Chicago welcomed all of our guests from the Democratic Party around the country. And we looked good.
Yeah, we did. Now, on the build up to it, there was a lot of tension around permits and marchers. And,
Yes.
I did get photographed back in '68. So trying to tip over a paddy wagon, and I had a little bit of attention. I did interviews with Judy Woodruff, with NPR, with Spanish TV, and some other ones, and they all wanted, of course, know about that, and they didn't really use much of me talking about now and the future. But I did hear that along the way that there was some tension between the mayor, who wanted to be a little bit more open on the marching, and the city's law department. Is that anything you can shed light on? Is that a true thing?
I can't speak to that, between the mayor and his law department. I do know that I certainly had a lot of anxiety. And I think, to your point, most of us did, leading up to this. How was our police department going to do? How was, were they going to be constitutional? Were people and demonstrators and folks coming to the city going to be able to voice their opinions and their First Amendment rights? Was the city going to, honor the permits for different things? And, on a personal note, I'll say, having been on the protest side of things, sometimes I feel like law departments would do better to work a little bit more with organizers, because a lot of times organizers are going to do it anyway. So it's like, there's trying to strike the right balance, I know, with safety. Now, one thing that was interesting in hosting an event like this is that it wasn't just the city having the final say, but the Secret Service. And so, that kind of complicates things a little bit. Ultimately, I know I did sign on to a letter raising some concerns that a bunch of other alders signed on to, a lot of progressives, that we were a little concerned leading up to the event about the kind of short length of the parade route given to the main protest, the locally organized one, and that the city had, promised to provide sound equipment and then kind of reneged on that. And, we had some safety concerns about it. Thankfully, everything worked out. There weren't necessarily as many people as they were expecting. And so some of the safety concerns we had about the shortness of the route they were given did not prove to be a problem. So, pleased about that. But, I commend the mayor and, the superintendent and all of our Chicago-based organizers for doing what they do best and making sure that anyone who showed up to demonstrate or protest was safe, was organized, was together. I know that was the advice I gave to kind of, neighbors and friends in the area, like, hey, if you're going out to protest the DNC, just make sure you've got a safety plan. Make sure you're going to a locally organized event, and that you know who the organizers are, because Chicagoans know how to organize and keep people safe. I was a little concerned. I think the only real problems we saw were from kind of that group that did that organized stuff. I think it was like on a Tuesday. They were kind of a group that seemed to be one of those outside groups. I know a lot of my local folks were not so keen about it. They were the folks pledging to make it like 68. I don't know if you saw some of
I
their
didn't follow.
things. They ended up doing some of the protesting down Sound, and where I think the only arrests were made, with a pretty intense group of people with an office based out of the Northwest side. So it was a little suspect, if you know what I mean, Michael.
Yeah, well, and here we go talking about the outside agitators.
Yeah. It's a little suspect, a little suspicious.
Let me ask you a few more things that just kind of came up in my mind. Can you fill our listeners and viewers in on the state of the police district councils? And then I have a few others. So save me a little time here.
Sure. So, our district council members are our kind of current newest elected roles. So there are 3 elected members to each of our police districts. Here in the 49th Ward, we're in the 24th Police District. So one of our elected counselors had to step down for personal reasons, and was unable to continue the role. And so we had an application process to fill the vacancy. So we're hoping to see a decision made on that vacancy soon. They did just host their monthly district council meeting last Sunday. So you can check my newsletter. We keep the monthly meetings up to date there. I'd encourage people to stop in. And so this is your elected officials that work on things specific to police performance and safety in our district. So if you've got concerns, if you've got ideas, if you want to know more about what's happening with police in our area, that's the place to go.
Let's move to homelessness. We had an issue in our ward for a while with a number of people camped out. That seems to be resolved. They were going to build a new shelter. I think construction has started. What's your sense on homelessness in the ward and beyond? Since we did lose that election,
the referendum for Bring
a lot
Chicago
of money
Home.
for Bring Chicago Home, which I hope will come up again.
Yeah. So I'll say, we still are seeing more and more people experiencing homelessness here in the 49th Ward and, of course, across the city. I'm really excited that construction has been progressing and quite well on the men's shelter that will be located on the Clark Street near the Gateway Center. I actually get to go and take a tour this Wednesday to kind of see how the progress is going. They got all the bathroom and sink fixtures donated by Kohler. IKEA's donated the furniture. They're completely redoing that building to make it just a wonderful space for what is a great program from Northside Housing Services. So men who are experiencing homelessness will be in a program, have some semi-permanent housing with on-site social services and whatever they need in order to help them move into permanent supportive housing at that location. And as we enter the budget season for the city, it's one of my top priorities to continue to push for the funding that we need for the rapid rehousing events, which were so successful in helping people experiencing homelessness in Tui Park and other parts of our ward to continue, as well as rental assistance. I think that's the biggest concern I see still coming up with 49th Ward residents. Rents are going up. Wages aren't going up. People are just feeling the pressure. We have a lot of properties that are older that have been purchased by new owners here. They go through rehabs. The new owners charge a lot more rent. And we're seeing displacement at just a rapid rate. And so the rental assistance piece is going to be key. But our COVID funds we're in our last year of these COVID funds. And so without the Bring Chicago Home referendum passing, as you mentioned, we don't have any new sources of revenue that we have to fund services to help people prevent homelessness and, of course, to get out of homelessness. So as a city, it's going to be, I think, a hot button issue through this budget cycle.
Let me ask you a little bit about the the DuSable Lakeshore Drive, which is, one of our most sacred things in the city is our
Yeah.
lakefront.
And we just had Bike the Drive yesterday. Natalia made me ride 20 miles.
That's good. Well, you're both jocks, so it's good that you've been running
We hadn't
marathons.
been on a bicycle in more than a month, Michael. And she's like, let's hop on the bike. We can do 20 miles. We did. And it was wonderful.
Rode the drive one time when I did a triathlon, and it was really wonderful.
Yeah.
But there's been over the years, there's been talk of putting Lakeshore Drive out into the lake, and now there's talk about redoing it, and there's a lot of pushback because it's not as environmentally conscious as we would like. What's your sense? What should people know about the attempts to alter Lakeshore Drive?
So they should know that we're coming up on what will probably be a once in our lifetime major infrastructure project. So for more than a decade, the city, working with the State Department of Transportation, has been evaluating, measuring, looking at numbers, and preparing to ask the feds for funds to help us redefine the drive. Now, some of the news as of late is that they've gone through a multi-year process, and they came to show us the 5 kind of final plans they came up with, and the city has said, hey, this is the one that we think is the best. And myself, many other alders, a lot of our state representatives, like our state rep Kelly Cassidy, our state senator Mike Simmons, all the representation for the 49th Ward, we find this essential plan that the city and IDOT have landed on to be pretty lacking, specifically in what we could do more for public transit. So if we're going to be redefining the drive, and some key things, they're looking to add more park space. They're looking to create more safety, right? So looking at like the S curve, where do we see a lot of bad traffic accidents? What could we do? But of course, some of the other important goals in this once in a lifetime infrastructure project are to increase access for public transit, and of course, to make it easier for pedestrians, bicyclists, and people kind of on all non-vehicle, non-car mobility to access the park space and the lake. And how can we redefine this for transit? So we think at minimum, we should see some dedicated bus rapid transit lanes, right? They're some of our most efficient and effective ways of getting people quickly on public transit from one place to another, particularly of import to us here in the 49th Ward. But we also, we think we can see more on kind of the environmental sustainability front. So right now we're, in a place where we have very vocally, with advocates, told the city, the mayor, the governor, and IDOT, this isn't quite good enough, and we're going to continue to push on that. Of note, I'll say I've got 2 things that are related, and you might see come up in committee over the next couple of months. One of them, related to Lakeshore Drive, is we're trying to create a shoreline advisory board. So as you mentioned, Lakeshore Drive is such a kind of seminal part of Chicago because it's on the lakefront. This is our most valuable resource, I think, outside of our people. And we don't really have any entity, any government entity or group or agency within the public sphere that advocates for and manages the lakeshore. And so, I'm proposing legislation that would create this shoreline advisory board, much like the Urban Forestry Advisory Board, which I sit on as chair of our Environmental Protection Committee, so that we can have a say. And why this is important is because the federal government, of course, has a lot of say on the shoreline, and us here in Rogers Park and Edgewater and Uptown, but especially Rogers Park and Edgewater, when we go through shoreline erosion, when we deal with different issues, when homes are at risk, we lost 3 beaches in 2020, right? We need to have a say as Chicagoans in what happens to our shoreline. Without a shoreline advisory board, the only group in conversation right now with the Army Corps is CDOT. And based on what we've seen from the Lakeshore Drive plan, we feel like we need a few more people at the table and a public, transparent process so that Chicagoans know we've got good advocacy at the table when it comes to any future decisions about our shoreline, our parks, and Lakeshore Drive.
That's good. Now, you did mention that you are involved with the Committee on Environmental Protection and Energy. You are the chairperson. through 2027. What do you got going on? What should we know about or be concerned about as you bring about more environmental justice on some of the issues that face us?
Sure. So, first off, our next committee for the Environmental Protection and Energy Committee meeting will be coming up at 12:30 next Tuesday, September 10th. So people, the public are always welcome to attend. We'll be in room 201A in City Hall. So again, open to the public. You can come, you can submit written comment, you can give public comment in person. And of course, we do have these meetings live streamed thanks to our city clerk, Ana Valencia. So we'll be talking about the Shoreline Advisory Board. We're also going to be talking about an issue that impacts us, but is particularly impacting folks in the Woodlawn and Inglewood community right now. And that is the Norfolk Southern Railroad. And community members there have been dealing with the negative environmental impacts of the rail station going through there. And they're looking at, tragedies that have happened in other communities, like in East Palestine, Ohio, with that train derailment, and have some big concerns about what we could see in Chicago. And we are going to be having a public, just like a subject matter hearing on some of those rail safety issues. We've got railways all throughout Chicago. In some ways, they define a lot of our neighborhoods. And so those are two big issues we're going to be tackling in the Environmental Protection and Energy Committee coming up this month. But some of the broader work for people to keep a lookout for, we'll have some end of the year reports on our urban forestry advisory board, what's going on with our urban canopy and how it's being better maintained and grown. And then, of course, going into next year, looking at the city's work with our Department of Environment on cumulative impacts, and of course on our Clean and Affordable Buildings Ordinance, CABO, where we're looking at setting emission standards for new construction.
A lot of information there. Now
So much info.
I got one more. I got a bunch of questions, but we're not going to get them all in today. But let me ask you, kind of broadly, how did you get involved in the movement? How did you move from like kind of demonstrating and organizing to becoming a person in electoral politics and becoming our alderwoman? And maybe finish up with some suggestions how we all can focus on local and issues beyond to make the world a better place.
So we'll see if I can do this without the dogs chiming in here. But they might have something to say about this.
We like dogs. Dogs are
right?
fine.
We like dogs. My work in local community organizing is just inextricably tied to getting into electoral politics. So I think, like a lot of people, I had no interest in electoral politics.
Right.
I voted regularly, right? Not a problem there. My parents raised me to be very active. But I didn't see myself in electoral politics, not a future in public office, nor did I see myself, honestly, in a lot of the local partisan organizing. So, all the work kind of going into things around individual candidates and people as the only solution did not appeal to me as a young person. Working with my neighbors to identify issues locally and act on local solutions, and to kind of organize in the form of, community action or protest, that was action, right? And I've always been drawn to action. But it's through those organizing experiences and really getting to know neighbors here in the 49th Ward, but across the city and in cities around the country, that what I found is I really wanted to do systems change. And, after enough people asked me to run for office, I took on this role with the hope that not only could I, of course, help neighbors address constituent issues and make Chicago a better city, but that I could contribute to the system change that we need to see in the city of Chicago. And at heart, and this is going to sound pretty cheesy, I am just a big champion for democracy. It's the way we live. It's an active thing, and it takes, just like being an anti-racist, right? Being a democratic actor. It's continual. It's continual change. It's continual work. We have to work for our democracy. So, like, especially as we're approaching in another election season, we've got a vote to make in November, right? With several people on the ballot, not just for president, but for other offices. And that's one part of our democratic action. But every day, every week, right, all year long, we need to be engaging locally with our neighbors, so that once we see whoever's in office based on our vote, we can also work to hold them accountable and continue to work on the changes, the policies, and the programs that we know are going to make our city and our country one that works for everyone.
Well, as one of your constituents, I want to say I think you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate all the work that you do, and the team and the people around you. And you and I both do live in a pretty wonderful part of Chicago, in a pretty wonderful city. So you keep up the great work, and I'll have you back on as soon as I can get you back on, and I'll see you in the neighborhood.
Sounds great. Thanks, Michael.
You, Maria. See you later.